The letter came on a Wednesday afternoon, stuffed into my mailbox like a threat wrapped in expensive paper. I was wheeling myself back from physical therapy, exhausted and sore, when I saw the HOA logo stamped across the envelope in aggressive red ink. I should have known something was wrong the moment I saw Patricia Whitmore standing on her perfectly manicured lawn, binoculars hanging around her neck like some kind of suburban spy. She'd been watching my house for weeks, I was sure of it, but I had no idea why until I opened that letter. Urgent violation notice. Unauthorized satellite dish installation detected at 2847 Maple Grove Drive, per HOA Covenant Section 12.4b. All satellite dishes require pre-approval and must not exceed 24 inches in diameter. Your installation violates both provisions. Fine, $2,500. Immediate removal required. I read it 3 times, my brain refusing to process the words. Satellite dish? I didn't have a satellite dish. I didn't even have cable. I streamed everything on my laptop like a normal person in 2024. Then it hit me. The ramp. My wheelchair ramp. The curved, metal wheelchair ramp that my contractor had installed just 2 weeks ago, so I could actually enter and exit my own home without struggling up 3 concrete steps. The ramp that insurance had finally approved after my car accident 6 months ago left me paralyzed from the waist down. The ramp that gave me independence for the first time since the accident. Patricia Whitmore thought my wheelchair ramp was a satellite dish. I would have laughed if I wasn't so angry. Instead, I wheeled myself straight to my laptop and pulled up the construction permits. Everything was legal. Everything was approved by the county. The HOA regulations specifically exempted accessibility modifications under the Fair Housing Act. I had done my homework. I had followed every rule. But clearly, Patricia hadn't done hers. The next morning, I wheeled down to the HOA office in the community center. Patricia was there, of course, sitting behind her desk like a queen on a throne. She was in her early 60s, with silver hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, wearing a lavender blazer that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Ms. Whitmore, I said, keeping my voice level, I received your violation notice. There's been a mistake. She looked up from her computer, her expression already showing annoyance at being interrupted. Mr. Chun, is it? Yes, I've been meaning to speak with you about that eyesore you've installed. It's visible from the street. Completely unacceptable. It's a wheelchair ramp, I said slowly, clearly. Not a satellite dish. She blinked. Excuse me. The structure you're calling an illegal satellite dish is actually a wheelchair ramp. A medically necessary accessibility modification that's protected under federal law. Patricia's face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, and then something that looked disturbingly like determination. I know what a wheelchair ramp looks like, Mr. Chun. I've seen plenty of them. What you've installed is clearly some kind of dish or antenna structure. The curved metal, the angle, it's obviously for receiving signals. I stared at her. It's curved because that's how wheelchair ramps work. The angle is for accessibility. I use it to get in and out of my house. Well, regardless of what you claim it's for, it wasn't approved by the board, and it's an eyesore. The fine stands. It doesn't need board approval, I said, my patience wearing thin. The Fair Housing Act explicitly exempts reasonable accessibility modifications from HOA restrictions. I have every legal right to have that ramp. Patricia's eyes narrowed. We'll see about that. I've already contacted our HOA attorney. You'll be hearing from him shortly. I wheeled out of there feeling like I'd entered a parallel universe where logic didn't exist. How could someone look at a wheelchair ramp with me, a person in a wheelchair, explaining what it was, and still insist it was a satellite dish? 2 days later, I got a call from my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez. She lived 3 houses down and had always been kind to me since I moved in. Daniel, she said, her voice hushed and urgent. I just left the HOA meeting. Patricia is telling everyone you've installed an unauthorized communications device. She's saying you're running some kind of illegal broadcasting operation. What? I nearly dropped my phone. She thinks I'm running a radio station? She showed pictures at the meeting. She circled your ramp in red and labeled it as suspicious equipment. She's got half the board convinced you're up to something shady. Daniel, she's pushing for a lawsuit to force you to remove it." My hands were shaking. This is insane. It's a wheelchair ramp. How can anyone look at it and see anything else? "I tried to tell them," Mrs. Rodriguez said sadly. "I told them I've seen you use it, that you're in a wheelchair, but Patricia talked over me. She said you could be faking your disability to hide your true intentions." Her words, not mine. I felt sick. This woman was not only attacking my home modifications, but now questioning whether I was actually disabled. The accident that had changed my entire life, the months of painful physical therapy, the loss of my career as a construction worker, all of that was being dismissed as some elaborate hoax. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Patricia's face, that absolute certainty that she was right and I was lying. I thought about the HOA attorney she'd mentioned, the lawsuit that might come, the possibility of being forced to remove the one thing that gave me independence. The next morning, I called my own lawyer. Her name was Sarah Ling, and she specialized in disability rights cases. "They're claiming what?" Sarah asked after I explained the situation, that my wheelchair ramp is a satellite dish, and now apparently I'm running some kind of illegal broadcasting operation. There was a long pause. Then Sarah started laughing, not a polite chuckle, but a full, genuine laugh that went on for almost a minute. "I'm sorry," she said, finally catching her breath. "I've been doing this for 15 years, and this is the most ridiculous case I've ever heard. But it's also cut and dry. They don't have a leg to stand on. The Fair Housing Act is crystal clear on this." So what do we do? First, I'm going to send them a letter explaining why they're violating federal law. Then, if they don't back down immediately, we're going to sue them for disability discrimination and harassment. And Daniel, we're going to win. Sarah's letter went out the next day. It was 5 pages of legal language that essentially said, "That's a wheelchair ramp. You're violating the Fair Housing Act, and if you don't drop this immediately, you're going to regret it." I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 3 days later, I came home from the grocery store to find Patricia and 2 other board members standing in my driveway, measuring my ramp with a tape measure. "What are you doing?" I called out, wheeling toward them. Patricia straightened up, clutching her tape measure like a weapon, documenting evidence. "This structure extends 8.7 feet from your house. That violates the setback requirements for decorative structures," I said, my voice rising. "Not for accessibility ramps, which again are exempt." One of the other board members, a man I didn't recognize, took a photograph of me. "We're also documenting that you're mobile enough to wheel yourself around." Calls into question whether this ramp is truly necessary. Something inside me snapped. "Get off my property. Now, this is HOA common area," Patricia said smugly. "Your driveway is technically. Get off my property. Now." My voice echoed across the neighborhood. A few neighbors came out to see what was happening. Patricia's face turned red, but she and her companions retreated to the sidewalk. "This isn't over," she called back. "The board is voting on forced removal next week, and we have the votes to pass it." That night, Mrs. Rodriguez called me again. "I contacted the local news," she said. "Channel 7. I told them what's happening. They want to interview you." 2 days later, a news crew was in my living room. The reporter, a sharp-eyed woman named Jennifer Park, listened to my story with growing disbelief. "So the HOA president thinks your wheelchair ramp is a satellite dish," she repeated, as if confirming she'd heard correctly. "Yes, and she's threatening to sue you to force its removal." "Yes, even after you've explained, multiple times, that it's a wheelchair ramp." "Yes." Jennifer turned to her cameraman. "We need to get footage of this ramp, and we need to talk to Patricia Whitmore." The segment aired 3 days later, during the evening news. They showed my ramp from multiple angles, with Jennifer explaining clearly and repeatedly that it was a wheelchair ramp. They showed me using it, demonstrating how it worked. They interviewed Mrs. Rodriguez and 2 other neighbors, who confirmed I was disabled and used the ramp daily. Then they showed their interview with Patricia. Ms. Whitmore, Can you explain why you believe this wheelchair ramp is actually a satellite dish? Patricia, sitting in her perfectly decorated living room, looked directly into the camera. That's not a wheelchair ramp. Wheelchair ramps are straight. This structure is curved and angled toward the sky. It's clearly designed to receive or transmit signals. But we have footage of Mr. Chen using it as a ramp. Anyone can wheel over something. That doesn't prove what it's designed for. Are you aware that the Fair Housing Act protects accessibility modifications? Patricia's jaw tightened. I'm aware that people abuse laws to get away with violations. Our community has standards. We have rules. And no one is above those rules. The interview ended with Jennifer's voiceover. The HOA board is scheduled to vote on forced removal next Tuesday. We'll continue following this story. The segment went viral. By the next morning, it had been shared thousands of times on social media. #WheelchairRampGate was trending. News outlets across the country were picking up the story. My phone wouldn't stop ringing with interview requests. And then the real avalanche started. The Department of Housing and Urban Development announced they were opening an investigation into the HOA for potential Fair Housing Act violations. The State Attorney General's office sent a letter to the HOA warning them against discriminatory practices. Disability rights organizations rallied outside the community center, holding signs that said ramps are not dishes and access is a right. Patricia went into hiding. The HOA canceled their vote, and 3 days later, I received a formal letter of apology from the board, along with notification that Patricia Whitmore had resigned as president. But the story wasn't over yet. A week after Patricia's resignation, I got a knock on my door. It was Patricia herself, looking smaller somehow, without her usual armor of expensive clothes and rigid posture. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, and her hair was down. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "A real one, not the corporate statement the board sent." I didn't invite her in, but I wheeled closer to the door. "I was wrong," she continued. "Completely, embarrassingly wrong. And worse than that, I was cruel. I questioned your disability, your honesty, your integrity. I tried to take away something you needed to live independently. And I did it because—" She paused, her voice cracking. "Because I was scared." "Scared of what?" "My husband had a stroke 6 months ago. He's been in a wheelchair ever since. We've been fighting with our insurance to get a ramp installed at our house, but they keep denying it. We can't afford to pay for it ourselves. And every day, I watch him struggle with those front steps, losing his dignity piece by piece. And then I saw your ramp, this beautiful, professional ramp, and I couldn't handle it. I was angry at the unfairness. I was jealous, and I took it out on you in the most horrible way possible." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face, but another part of me understood that pain, that desperation, that feeling of being trapped by circumstances beyond your control. "You should have just asked me about it," I finally said, "instead of attacking me. I know, and I'm so sorry. I've lost my position, my reputation, probably my friends in this community, and I deserve all of that. But I need you to know that I see it now. I see what I did to you, and I will spend a long time being ashamed of myself." She turned to leave, then stopped. For what it's worth, after all this publicity, 3 different organizations have reached out to help my husband. We're getting our ramp installed next week. Something good came from this mess, even if I don't deserve it. I watched her walk away, and I felt something shift inside me. The anger was still there, but it was mixed with something else now. Understanding, maybe. Or just the recognition that hurt people, and sometimes redemption is possible. 2 months later, the HOA enacted new policies specifically protecting accessibility modifications and requiring disability sensitivity training for all board members. They also established a fund to help homeowners with medical needs make necessary modifications. And last week, I saw Patricia at the community center. She was volunteering at a disability resource fair, helping other families navigate the process of getting accessibility equipment. When she saw me, she didn't look away. She nodded, a small gesture of acknowledgement. I nodded back. My ramp is still there, of course, curved and beautiful and absolutely not a satellite dish. Every time I use it, I think about how close I came to losing it, and how many people rallied to defend my right to access my own home. The whole experience taught me something important, that sometimes the loudest voices are the most afraid, and that justice, when it finally comes, can arrive in ways you never expected. And if anyone ever questions what that ramp is for again, well, I've got a viral news segment I can show them.